And we're live on Book Chat Live with amazing mystery author Suzy Bussell, which I don't think your real name, and also it's not much of a mystery. You are an author, aren't you? Sorry.
I am. Hello, Tim. Thank you for having me. Yeah, you can just describe me as a mystery author. That's fine.
Yeah, you are the mystery author. You write mysteries. That's I think what I was the point I was trying to make. Anyway, shall we get into the book choices?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Right, here we go. 7 Daughters and 7 Sons by Barbara Cohen and Bahija Lovejoy. So, why did you pick this book?
Yeah, so I know we don't normally need a physical copy, but I've got a physical copy of that book, or my physical copy of that book. It's really old. It's from the 80s. And it is quite hard to get hold of a copy of this. And I picked it up. I can't even remember where I picked it up. But it's an absolutely amazing sort of retold folk story from Iraq. And it sort of starts off, there's sort of dual perspectives. So the first third of the book is from the perspective of a woman, a young woman. And she is one of 7 daughters. And she's got a close family, her uncle, who has got 7 sons. And so although there's a fair amount of this where it's kind of sort of talking about the roles that women had back in the day, it's actually about how her family, because they have so many daughters and no sons, have no money. So she basically disguises herself as a boy or a young man and goes off to seek her fortune effectively. And it's about her story over about 2.5 years, and how she basically makes her fortune pretending to be a man. And then in the second part of it, it's from the perspective of a member of the royalty at that time, and how he meets her, doesn't realize that she's actually a woman. And so it's kind of like, if you ever watched the film Yentl, a little bit that type of thing. It's not quite the same because it's a little bit, obviously it's sort of different cultures, but it's along those lines where they don't realize that it's actually a woman, and they get on really well, and they end up having this sort of romance, but it actually ends up, they start to fall for each other, and in the end, the third part of the story goes back to her perspective. And it basically, she makes her fortune, and she just sort of disappears on this man that she's been really good friends with. He doesn't know she's a woman until she leaves a little clue that actually she was a woman at the end. And obviously, because it's a folk tale, there's a happily ever after. But it's such a good story. It is so gripping. It's written so well, and I love folk tales as well. So, especially, any folk tales really, but it really draws you in the way that they've rewritten it and made it really accessible.
Okay, well, should we go on? I wonder. So, normally I ask people to say why they like the book, but you kind of like said it all in the thing. So should we go to the next book?
I know what I like.
Yeah, right. Here we... Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson.
Yeah, so this one is a book that a friend gave me, and I didn't read it for about 4 years until 4 years after she gave it to me. And she kept saying, you've got to read it. It's such a good book. Yeah. And it's actually published by Persephone Books in Bath. They have a shop, and they sort of specialize in publishing mainly female authors, sort of from the turn of the century, or sort of 19th century, 1900s. Yeah. I can never work out whether it's the 19th or 20th century. Anyway, from the 1900s-ish. And so basically it's set in one day, 24 hours. And that's why it's called Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day. And it's about a woman who is, she's a sort of a spinster. She's sort of 40s. And she has to look after other people's horrible children, basically.
Yeah.
And she ends up accidentally being sent to what is an actress and sort of nightclub singer. who, and basically it's about how in that 24 hours, these two women, their lives just completely transformed because they've met each other. They actually made it into a film. They did change the storyline a little bit. And I had seen the film before I read the book. I mean, you know, books and films often differ, unless it's, you know, Harry Potter. But they're both really good, but they have changed the film a little bit. But it's just amazing how these two completely different women, just their lives are just totally transformed because they've met each other. And it's sort of a bit like not quite a PG Wodehouse farce, but it's along those lines. It's sort of, it's very of its time, of that sort of era. So yeah, really, really enjoyable book, and I totally recommend it. Really, really funny.
Yeah, you've got a kind of a penchant for historical books and written, well, not as in historical fiction, but written a long time ago. Would you say that's
yes,
true?
Definitely. Yeah.
So are you somebody who's read all the classics, so to speak, or are you just like looking for more just interesting books that have to be historical?
I haven't read all the classics. I mean, I haven't read any Charles Dickens. I only ever watched Charles Dickens dramatizations. I have tried to read Charles Dickens, but couldn't get through it. But I have read all the Brontes, all Jane Austen, Elizabeth Gaskell, sort of along those lines. So yeah, I haven't read any of them for a very long time, really. Well, apart from Jane Austen, but in my 20s, I read a lot. I read them a lot and devoured them, actually. So yeah.
Okay, well, shall we go on to the next book, which is by a very esteemed, much more modern author. So let's see who this book is by. X Marks the Spot by Suzy Bussell, which is you, of course. So you're not from the 1900s. So.
I'm not, no. Well, 1900 and something, 70 something.
Well, we won't go into it.
We won't go into that. So yeah, so this is my book, X Marks the Spot, and this is the first book in my series set in Exeter, because I live in Devon, and although I don't come from Devon, I grew up in Hertfordshire, but I've lived here in Devon for 20 years now, almost 21, and it really gets under your skin here. It is really just the most amazing county. Shh, don't tell anyone. It's just so beautiful. And so anyway, about my book, it's set in Exeter, and it's about two private detectives. One of them is ex-police. He decided to leave it because he didn't want all the stress, and he's in his sort of early 50s. And then the second detective is a cybersecurity expert, and she sort of helps the detective because he's a bit of a technophobe, doesn't really know what he's doing with technology at all, and she's basically needs some sort of fulfillment in her life, and she finds it by helping the private detective. And she's a very skilled cybersecurity expert, so she ends up sort of trying to hack everybody and finding it very easy to get clues, etc., because she is so skilled with the technology. So yeah, this book, as I said, it's the first in the series, and it's about a missing young man who is they need to find the family. He left a note to say that he's gone away. The police don't want to do anything because he's left a note to say he's just gone, but her parents think that something's gone wrong, and they want him found, basically. So it's all about how they try and track down this boy, or young man.
Okay, and you're from a kind of a computers, as I recall having a conversation with you, you're from a sort of computer science background yourself. So are you, I don't know if this was one of the first books you were writing, or did you put a little bit yourself into this female computer genius person, cyber security person?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as far as the character goes, she's nothing like me at all. She does all the things that I would never dare to do. But yeah, technology-wise, I mean, I'm not a skilled hacker like her, but I really am interested in technology and how you can use it, and how easily people can be hacked, and how little people know. And that was actually the aim when I first wrote the book. I wanted to try and teach, obviously in my mind, most readers are, 80% of readers are supposed to be women. So my aim was to try and help women educate themselves as to sort of some of the technology without having a boring book about technology to read, and to try and make it more enjoyable. And obviously, that was my ideal reader. It doesn't mean that men can't read it. It's not just, at all. It's just that's just the way that I wanted to. My ideal reader. They always say when you write a book, you should have an ideal reader, and that was my ideal reader anyway. So it was definitely sort of kind of on purpose. I added a lot of technology, and sometimes I'll be watching TV shows or reading books, and I was watching something the other day, a murder mystery, and there was a murder on the bus, and I'm like, they have CCTV on the bus now. Yeah. You don't have to do all this investigations to who got on the bus, who got off it. There's CCTV, so some of the technology that I see, it's not utilized as much as it could be in mysteries, and so that was kind of my aim, to introduce it more.
Okay, well, shall we go on to the next book, which isn't written by you? So, right, here we. Mindfulness: A Practical Guide to Finding Peace in a Frantic World, by Mark Williams and Danny Penman. So, why this book?
Yeah, so this is obviously a non-fiction book. This was one of my first things that I bought through Facebook advertising. So this book was recommended to me by Facebook, or someone. There was some kind of ad that came up, and I don't even know why it thought that I needed this book, but it was, and that's why I don't mind Facebook ads, by the way, because they do seem to help promote products that actually I like, instead of on TV where you just get car adverts or something. But this book is great because I went through a very difficult time about 10, maybe slightly more years ago, where I was starting to get really quite sort of anxious about things. I won't bore you with the details as to why that was, but lots of people get anxious anyway and have anxiety. And I've never thought about or knew about meditation, or because mindfulness is just another name for meditation. I think they changed it to meditation, from meditation to mindfulness, to make it a bit more accessible to people. But it's just such a fantastic book that helps explain in practical ways, not just sort of saying, oh, you've got to meditate and you'll feel better. It tells you exactly how to do it. And it just changed my life. It completely changed my life. And I think I would have been in a lot worse a place if I hadn't have come across this book. So it's really, really good. And they've actually got a website called, I think it might be something like Frantic World. I did write it down, but I haven't brought it with me. They've got a website, but if you Google them, they've got an audio of their meditations that they talk about in the book on their website for free. So you don't even have to buy the book if you don't want to. Really, really good book. Yeah,
it's something I've always kind of mean to get into, but I think they've called it mindfulness to take away the whole religious aspect of like meditation, because people think Buddhism and the rest of it, when there's not really like any reason why it needs to be associated with Buddhism. But
no.
I have been looking for a good book on it, so maybe this is the one. I've got this enormous backlog of books to read from this show, but it's been good though, because like the last couple of months or so, I've been listening to audiobooks of lots of the books on the show, and some really, really, really good books that people have recommended. I mean, there's actually some bad books, usually written by the people themselves. Not me to say anything, but. There are. So this sounds like something I might. Anyway, should we go on to the next?
They do have this on as audio as well. Actually, it's on Audible, so you can get that too.
Okay, well that's good. Next credit month, or next time I get a credit, I'll put this down. Right, let's go to the next one. Introduction to Networking: How the Internet Works by Charles R. Severance.
Severance, yeah. So this book is a technical book, obviously, because it's teaching you how the internet works. Now, this book is probably not for someone who is a complete technophobe or has zero knowledge about technology. However, it is a really accessible book. The guy who's written it, Charles Severance, is so good at communicating how technology works. It's I just wish I had his gift of explaining technology. It's amazing. And yeah, basically it goes into detail about how the internet works. It talks about the different sort of layers and protocols involved in it in a really, really accessible way. And so if you are kind of interested in how it works, it's not a very thick book. It's not, a lot of technology books can be sort of, really thick. This one is not very thick at all. It's not very long. It's really concise. And if you really want to, they've got quiz questions in it as well, so you can test your knowledge and how much you understood. So yeah, really good book for understanding how the internet works.
Okay. I actually did it. I did an MSc in computer science in 1995 and did a networking course. I'm not sure it's actually changed that much, but this might be quite an interesting book for me because it's like, A, I can't remember a lot of it, and B, it probably has changed a little, but yeah, I mean, the same fundamentals. It's all like, TCP, all these different layers of networking.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It hasn't changed a lot. It hasn't changed a lot. TCP IP is still there. But there are some extra things that will have happened since 1995. And that was about the time when I was doing my bachelor's degree in computer science. So, so I think the main thing is that, if you remember, it was just we were about the only people using the internet back then, weren't we? So at university.
Anyway, let's get through the books before we start reminiscing about the 90s technology.
Sorry.
No, it's my fault entirely. Right, here we go. The Lazarus Heist: From Hollywood to High Finance Inside North Korea's Global Cyber War by Geoff White.
So this book is really absolutely fascinating. And part of the thing that I have to do for my extra mystery series is keep up to date with sort of cybersecurity news. And I do that via a couple of podcasts or books. And this book was absolutely fascinating because it goes into what, most people would think that North Korea, that they would be really backwards and have no technology, don't know what they're doing, but actually they're probably one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. And this book talks about how they have been behind, or allegedly behind, a lot of the really big global cybersecurity hacks out there. So, for example, the Sony one, which was quite infamous, quite a long time ago now, where Sony got hacked and emails got put on the internet because they basically did a film about the president of North Korea, and so they were told to hack it, basically. But it goes beyond that, actually. It goes beyond loads and loads of different things that they've done or that they claim that they've done. And what they tend to do is send people out into other countries. They train them up, and then they send them out to other countries to hack in other countries. And they launder the money that they get, and that's what's propping up North Korea, basically. Because a lot of people think that by now, you think with all the sanctions, North Korea would have sort of had to surrender their stance, so to speak. And so basically, it explains how they do it, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I remember years ago reading a book about hacking, and so much of it is human-based. Like, if you've got a big company, if you can get into the phone system and just ring from like an internal number and say, "I'm Bob from IT, can you tell me your password to the system?" Surprisingly large number of people will give you that information. Knowledge is really powerful when it comes to hacking and knowing at least what kind of things you shouldn't be doing. It doesn't mean you're immune from it, but
no.
Sounds like. Is this a fairly recent book, or how long?
It's a couple of years ago, couple of years ago. So yeah.
But still, it sounds like it's both interesting and potentially useful for knowing how hacking works.
Yeah, and how, you know, it's the extent to it as well, and why they get these people to do it, even though they're living in other countries. They basically hold their families hostage and say, if you don't do what we say, then we're going to kill your family. So yeah, they end up having to hack and launder the money from that.
Yeah. Okay. You have given possibly the most split set of books I've seen for a while. Let's go to a totally opposite.
Totally different.
Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which remarkably nobody has picked on the show before. We've had Emma and we've had Persuasion, but we've never had Pride and Prejudice. So why Pride and Prejudice?
So that's really surprising, because I'm on, maybe it's because I'm on lots of Facebook groups where everybody just loves this book. But so this one goes back to when I was 15, and I was doing my GCSE in English literature. And I went, basically the books that we were forced to study and the plays were just awful. I can't even describe how awful they were. And it put me off reading so much. But as part of that GCSE, we had to pick one book, sort of a literary book. So we were told not Agatha Christie, which was a bit weird. But anyway, and I didn't know what to pick. I didn't have a clue. And my mum suggested Pride and Prejudice, and she sort of gave me a little synopsis of it, and I thought it sounded really good. And she actually raved about it. And I did find it really hard reading to start with, because the language was so different to the sorts of stuff that I read before. But I just absolutely loved it. There wasn't, you know, I read it not fully understanding it all, but then reread it, and, you know, even now, after reading it probably about 30 different times, I still find things in it that I missed. And even more amazingly is that Jane Austen was sort of about 20 years old when she wrote it as well. So absolutely phenomenal amount of work for such a young woman to have written. And I just love it because, at the time I was so disillusioned with what we were forced to read. All the books were about men. All the books had women in them who were manipulative, or they were passive observers. And this book was about women, and they were about my age. Some of them were about my age. You know, Lydia Bennet in the book is 15. I was 15, and they all lived in Hertfordshire, and I lived in Hertfordshire. And it's not just I know it's quite famous for having the love story, but it's more than that. It's like it's got embarrassing parents, which as a teenager, you know, your parents aren't actually embarrassing, but you feel that they are, you know. So it's about family dynamics. It's about the pressure that people are under from their social group. It's just such an amazing book. And it's always been an absolute favourite of mine. So really good. My neighbour's cat's trying to get in.
Is your neighbour's cat Pride and Prejudice fan? It's Mr. He's not called Mr. Darcy, the neighbour's cat.
No, unfortunately, no.
No. Well, famously, I mean, I've seen the TV adaptation of this because my mum used to record and play it constantly, Pride and Prejudice. So I have actually listened to the audio version of all of Jane Austen's work. She is just very good, and this is probably arguably the best, and certainly the most well known. And I think you were inspired because you asked, you said, oh, well, one of your books is very related to this book. So that is coming up next.
Yes.
So shall we talk about that in a second once I get my tech right? Haunted High Tea and Homicide by Suzy Bussell. So
so this one, I mean, so you know, I've been raving about Pride and Prejudice, and I have read all Jane Austen's work, and including her unfinished novels. And so it was only a matter of time before that spilled over into my own work. And basically this is a paranormal cozy crime. It's my new series. is the first book that's out. It's just out a few weeks ago, and I'm about nearly near the end of the second one now. But it's again set in Devon. It's set in Sidmouth this time, which is on the south coast of Devon, in a Regency seaside town, and it was originally just a fishing village in the just before about 1800. And the Prince Regent visited Sidmouth with a friend, and suddenly then, because he'd visited, it became a very popular place for the nobility and the gentry to come and visit and holiday there. So it's got Regency ties, and it's, if you go to Sidmouth, and the sign for it says Regency Seaside Town, and Jane Austen went there as well. So she went there in 1801 and stayed there. She was doing the same trip she was when she went to Lyme Regis. So for those if you remember in Persuasion, Persuasion is partly set in Lyme Regis, where Louisa Musgrove throws herself off what's called the cob and damages her head or bangs her head. And in the same trip that summer, Jane Austen went and stayed in Sidmouth. And so it was kind of like, it's kind of like a little niche that no one's really touched on, and they don't make much of it either locally. They don't really mention about the fact that she's gone. Sidmouth is in its own right is very popular seaside town, and it's just down the road from me. But it's there's no shortage of visitors, and it has a folk festival every summer as well, which just brings thousands of people. So they probably don't really need to go on about the fact that Jane was there. But in my book, I have a woman in her 40s called Trinity, and she has set up a Regency-themed tea room, and it's basically a murder mystery. So it's a cozy crime, and she is the sleuth. But it's called Haunted High Teen Homicide because it's a paranormal. So there are ghosts, and they're friendly ghosts, though. So it's not it's not a thriller. It's a cozy crime. And she is given a ring which looks just like Jane Austen's ring, which actually I wore it today so that you can see. This is famously Jane Austen. It's not Jane Austen's ring. It's a replica, but the original is in Jane Austen's house in Chawton. Anyway, when she puts on the ring, she can see ghosts, and they bear a striking resemblance to a lot of the characters in Pride and Prejudice, although slightly different names. And so the premise of it is the ghosts were, Jane Austen owned the ring. She could see the ghosts as well, and she based some of her characters in Pride and Prejudice on the ghosts that are in the ring. So they help her sleuth and solve the murder, because her opening for her tea room, someone is murdered, so she has to try and find who the murderer was.
It sounds kind of interesting. So it took a long time to get to the Pride and Prejudice link, but it actually is.
It did.
Linked to Pride and Prejudice. Sorry
about that.
Well, no, it sounded like a message from the Sidmouth tourist board for a while, and fair enough.
Well, yeah.
Is that the place on the kind of near the river that goes up to Exeter? It's like is it on the bottom side there somewhere?
No, that's Exmouth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's Exmouth.
Is the River Sid that Sidmouth is on this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sensible naming.
Because there's Axmouth as well, and that's River Axe. So
Okay. Well, I asked everybody 2 questions. I'm going to ask you 3 questions because I thought of one during the interview, which I want to talk about. But the first question, and I know you've seen some of these before, so if you had to pick one of these books, what would be to give somebody? What sort of questions would you ask that person? I mean, is there one book you would give them anyway? But if not, is there what would your flow chart in your head? What sort of questions would you ask a person to work out which of these books to give them?
I think I would probably give Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day.
Yeah.
And I would just ask them to just think about, or just enjoy how uplifting that book is, actually. There's so many books out there that, not putting anything down I prefer uplifting books, as you can tell by the ones that I've selected, and just enjoy it, really. Just lose yourself in it. Okay.
And for those who, I mean, you've got a lot of non-fiction books here. So which of these non-fiction books would you pick if you had to?
Probably the mindfulness one, because that's so practical and so helpful. And I think everybody, even if there's people who think, oh, meditation, I don't need to do that, it's so helpful. Even if you haven't tried it before, you can just do it anywhere. You can meditate anywhere, anytime. You don't have to close your eyes and sit cross-legged on the floor. And that's what the book teaches you. And it's a really practical, helpful thing, especially with sort of everything going on in the world. It can be quite overwhelming at times. And it kind of helps you center yourself and think about the present.
Okay. And well, the other question I normally ask is like, what have you got coming up book-wise? But I'm not sure it really actually, because how many books have you written in total? I mean, I don't think you've written more than these 2 books, have you? Or?
Yes. The series has got 6 books. And and obviously the Tea Room book that in Sidmouth is just the first one, and the second one will be out hopefully around about December.
And is that going to carry on with the Pride and Prejudice theme, or was that just for the whole?
It is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, are you gonna mix in any other Jane Austen like characters, or are you keeping quiet?
That would be telling. I can't say.
Okay. And so that's the next book coming up. And how many are you somebody who just writes a series of books, or are you one of these insane people who writes multiple series at the same time, or anything like that?
No, I just write one at a time, really. I finished the 6th book in the Exeter series and felt I still have other books I know I want to write for that, and I have actually started the 7th book, but I've had to park it while I'm just doing the second Tea Room book, because I just can't mentally swap between the two. It has to be one at a time, totally. I'm
not one at a time person, but I know that there's some people literally just write write books, and I'm like, I don't know how you can do that.
I don't know how they do it either. No, I don't know.
The secret third question. Well, it's not a secret. It's just like, because I've never written mystery. I've always liked mystery TV, and to some extent I like reading mystery books, but I haven't really ever done it that much. I always get waylaid. But there must be a unique issue with, and you touched on it a little bit, with technology and stuff, with mystery, certainly when it comes to solving crime, because obviously a book set now, there's a whole load of DNA and other evidence and CCTV that would not be applicable to something set in like 1930, for example.
No.
So how much effort do you put into kind of learning all of those kind of things, or do you focus on mysteries that really wouldn't be ruined by somebody saying like, well, there should be DNA evidence there?
I mean, you have to have that in the back of your mind, that whenever it's set, kind of what technology or science do they have at that point. I mean, it is really tricky, because sometimes you kind of have to suspend belief in a way. I mean, obviously with the paranormal book, you kind of have to do that anyway. But I mean, I attended a talk from someone who does fingerprints for the police. And they basically said that, and it was a mystery convention for authors, and they said, it's been 20 odd years since they haven't solved a murder in Devon, because of all the science and the technology that they have. So, obviously a point there, if you're going to commit a murder, you're not going to get away with it, but which is good, I suppose. But you do kind of have to just kind of really think, well, is there something really glaringly obvious that could mean that person gets caught? So if there is CCTV, maybe it gets switched off. Fingerprints, they're just as careful as they can, but somehow they are going to be found out. So, I mean, as far as the technology goes for the Exeter series, I definitely work really hard, and I'm just generally very interested in that anyway. So I will listen to podcasts about cybercrime and think, oh, that's a really good way, or what is and isn't possible with cybercrime. And everything in my books is real cybercrime, or can be done in reality. It's not sort of made up technobabble like science fiction. So it just depends on how much of that you want in your book, really. And I think the main thing is to center on the mystery, and then, but also think, kind of what would interest you? What do you like? And I know I'm like you, though. I don't read a massive amount of murder mysteries or books that I write. I do read some, but not many. And I watch more TV. And so you'll find that my books are more like, each book is like an episode, sort of an 1.5-hour episode of, like Vera type, or McDonald and Dodds or something like that, where they're not the longest books ever, but they are, very sort of typical of a TV show, especially where they're set out by scenes and they're written, with each scene as if it was a TV show, because it has such a big influence on my sort of creativeness and writing.
So your last book was like, your last and your next book have got paranormal stuff in it. That must have been a little bit, because that obviously is a moving away from, well, maybe not realism, I don't know, maybe you have got ghosts there, but at least from what you would call like the more realistic trend. So was it just the whole Jane Austen link that encouraged you to do that, or was this just wanting to move away from the sort of hyper realistic sort of mystery?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt that the technology side of stuff was being covered in the Exodus series, and I am continuing on with it. And I just wanted to do something different. And it, kind of what I've written really reflects what sorts of things I enjoy reading, or like sort of the entertainment of, not necessarily reading, but TV, etc. So it's just because, and obviously I'd written, because I've got 6 books. I'd been writing that series for about 4 years, and so I was kind of like, I really want to do something different, just for a bit, not forever, but for a bit. And I have got other series that I want to write. I don't know when I'm going to find the time to do those, but they are on the back burner for the moment. But
okay, well, it's been great to have you on the show. If people want to find out more about you and more about your mystery in your book, how can they do that?
So I've got a website, suzybussell.com. I'm on Facebook, Suzy Bussell Author, and I'm also on Instagram. I think it's just Suzy Bussell, or Suzy Bussell Author. But if you go to my website, there's links on there, and I will post to sort of Facebook and Instagram if there's anything sort of mildly interesting going on. And I do have a newsletter as well. So I do put quite a lot of stuff in my newsletter that I don't put on social media. So if you want to find out more, you can sign up for my newsletter on my website. That's on there too. Okay.
And thanks to the people there are people watching on Amazon. So clearly your exciting range of books has brought people to the yard, so to speak. So thanks for people watching on Amazon. Thanks to people watching in future on YouTube. And thanks so much for being the guest today, Suzy.
You're very welcome, Tim. It's great to talk to you again.
Okay.